Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House. We're here with the ostentatious Charles Coulombe.
Well, I like that. Ostentatious indeed.
You embrace that? You embrace the title?
Embracing ostentation. I don't know if I embrace the title, but it would be a good title for something. A self-help book, maybe.
Okay.
Embracing ostentation. How you can make pomposity work for you.
That would be a bestseller.
I'm sure it would.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would do very well.
Wow. Very impressed. So what's new, Charles? It sounds like you've had a busy 2 weeks.
Oh, I'll say. I've been on the road since I left the fabled shores of California and came back to the mother continent. I have been on the go. It's true. First, I was back here for a few days in Trumau, Austria, and then I took a long trip, not back to my hometown, as the opening episode of the second season of Man in the High Castle would have you believe.
Oh,
no, I didn't go to my hometown. I went first to the Vendée in France. I had a 7-hour layover in Barcelona, and that gave me a lot of time to explore the old downtown, the cathedral where the Mercedarian order was founded, the old Gothic center of Barcelona, which was just beautiful. My friend Oswald had recommended a restaurant, and boy, was he right. It was really good. And I just had a tremendously wonderful experience. So that was only the 7 hours in Barcelona. Then I get back on the plane, and I flew to Nantes in Western France, and was picked up and went to a school in the depths of the Vendée called Chavagne. Now, Chavagne is an interesting place. The headmaster is a man called Ferdy McDermott. He's an old friend of mine, a Scot, and I first knew him when he was an undergrad at the University of Edinburgh, and I was giving a lecture there many years ago. Well, at any rate, he was hired to be headmaster of this place, and he's turned it into an international college. Medium of instruction is primarily English, though they have French and various other languages. Very Catholic school with a renowned chaplain. They have the Tridentine Mass, and it's just a really neat setup he has there. But being a Scot, he introduced the custom of the Robert Burns supper. Now, you're probably not familiar with this, but Robert Burns was of Scotland, born on the 25th of January. So every year, all around the world, including Los Angeles, where you could have gone to a Burns supper hosted by one of the Scottish societies there, or even the fabulous Tam O'Shanter, which place you know.
Mm-hmm.
They too put on a Burns supper, and they're all the same. The guests are piped in, then they pipe in a haggis, and someone gives the address to the haggis, in which the described food is cut open and served. And then when dinner is finished, usually it's served with potatoes and turnips. There's usually a soup beforehand. Then the haggis is served, and then the toasts. Well, the centerpiece of the toasts is usually a fairly long one, to the immortal memory of Robert Burns, in which usual toast goes on a long chat about Robert Burns for one reason or another. And that was my job at the dinner in Chavagne, and I did it. Then there's the address to the ladies, which is a humorous description of the female race, which is then followed by the response to the laddies.
Okay.
In which one or more of the women present deliver a response. So they're quite convivial, and it was a lot of fun. Then the following days, I explored Luçon, which is an old cathedral, a couple of other sites where the counter-revolutionaries were slaughtered during the terrible wars of the Vendée.
Mm.
And then I went to Nantes and explored the cathedral, a number of the churches, and the convent of the Visitation. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful places with a lot of memorials to the counter-revolutionaries and to the papal zouaves, a lot of whom were recruited. So I really enjoyed that. Then I flew to London and had a part on January 30th commemorations of the murder of King Charles I by Oliver Cromwell.
Mm.
And the next couple of days in London, I saw friends and went to various places like the Carlton Club, the great conservative private club. And then at last I went up to Cambridge. And Cambridge, I went to not one but two Candlemas masses, one of which was Anglican Ordinariate style. And I was a sponsor for my godson from India. I was his confirmation sponsor. So that was exciting.
Wow. Must be nice.
It is. It is. So, and of course, I know you're keen on knowing how I spent my Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how was your Super Bowl Sunday?
Well, I don't know how the Super Bowl went. I don't know who was playing, let alone who won. But I can tell you that I spent it, the first part of it in Cambridge. I went to Sunday Mass at Blackfriars, the Dominican house, and it was the Dominican Rite Latin Mass offered by my favorite living theologian, Father Aidan Nichols, O.P.
Wow.
who I finally got to meet.
Wow.
And we had a very nice conversation afterwards.
Did he know you?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
And you'll be happy to know, he said, I'm sure we've met before. And I said, no, we haven't. He said, you've forgotten. We must have met. I've seen you. I said, no. We've spoken on the phone. We've exchanged letters and all that, but we had never met face to face. And then he said, I must have seen you on television.
Oh, okay.
So apparently, at one point, Father Nichols must have seen one of these things.
Okay.
Unless he saw me on TV, and another is also possible. I think it's
Wow.
like it. So, so if you're watching this at some point, Father Nichols, great honor. But that wasn't the end of my Super Bowl Sunday.
Wow.
I left Blackfriars. I had a quick coffee and croissant, and then I took an Uber out into the depths of the Fen Country for my second visit to the manor at Hemmingford Grey.
They have Uber over in Europe too?
Oh yes, believe me, it's a lifesaver when you get stuck places. If they have Uber, because not everywhere has it. So that was the fun part, because the Uber took me. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I go for a second time, not one, but a second time, to this obscure manor house in the depths of the Fen Country?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is because it was the home of a lady called Lucy Boston, who wrote a series of kid books that I grew up with, the Green Nose stories. And it's very strange because everything in the books have a real world equivalent in the house. And so going there for me was a little bit like opening up a wardrobe and seeing the lamppost in the distance in Narnia.
Oh, I see. Wow.
Yeah, a very, very strange feeling. But this is my second visit, so it wasn't the same Teresa thing. The lady of the manor, the authoress's daughter-in-law, was good enough to give me a copy of the recently published book of her mother-in-law's ghostly tales, which I was very keen on. And I had a nice cup of tea with her in front of the roaring fireplace where so much happens in the stories. It was just a really, really pleasant visit. And then she drove me to the bus station so I wouldn't have to take the cab because there's no bus that goes into Hemmingford Gray anymore.
Well, that was nice.
It was. It was also saved me a lot of money, I'll tell you. And then I went back to Cambridge, collected up my suitcase, hopped on a plane, and came back to the imperial lands. Back to the Kaiserstadt. But it was interesting, that little bit of time, submersed as I've been in Middle Europa and Central Europe, and much as I've come to love it. It's good to be reminded of how much I love things Spanish, French, and English, too. I had a blast.
Yeah.
Mother continent, I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never been here, you need to come and see as much of it as you can. Everything you see will have a lesson for you. I promise. So that's how I spent my Super Bowl Sunday. Who was playing and who did win?
I can say names, but they're not going to mean anything to you. The Patriots played the Los Angeles Rams, and the Patriots won.
The Rams are a football team.
Yeah, see, I knew you were going to do something like this. I knew you were just yeah, the Rams are a football team. Super Bowl is football.
Oh, so it's not the World Series.
No, it's not the World Series. No.
Did the Dodgers ever play the Rams?
Oh, gosh. You're doing this on purpose. You're hurting me, Charles. Oh, man.
Or was it the Maple Leafs?
No, that's Canada. Hockey, I think.
Wayne Gretzky was a football.
No,
Rams,
he wasn't. No, he wasn't.
No?
No.
All right. If you say so.
Oh, man. Okay, moving on. Wow. So people have been asking about our flags.
Really?
Someone asked, "What is it? What's the deal?" So I told them the truth. We're in a secret league together. And that's sort of our.
Yes, I know. From one end of this globe to the other, there are these, like yours and mine, there are these hidden bunkers displaying this flag. In South Africa, China, the Amazon, anywhere you go, you'll find rooms like this. Notice that the colors of our walls even are similar.
That's true.
You see, the secret high command are the ones who give us all orders.
Yes. So
until now, their standard command has been watch and wait.
Ah, yes, yes.
Actually, should I tell them what the flag really means?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to?
Yeah, it'll be okay.
All right. You won't get upset.
Okay. No.
All right. The flag is actually the forerunner of the modern Quebec flag. This was the flag that you're seeing both behind me and behind you was called the Drapeau. Are you ready for this? Drapeau de Carillon Sacré-Cœur, which means the Carillon flag of the Sacred Heart. And basically, it was designed to commemorate a great battle the French Canadians had fought against the English, which took on a sort of feeling of nationhood. But the addition of the Sacred Heart was like, was in keeping St. Coque's request to the King of France that the Sacred Heart be put on the French flag. Eventually, this was the forerunner of what became the modern flag of Quebec, which similarly has 4 fleurs-de-lis in the corner, only they're right side up, and there's no Sacred Heart. But nevertheless, it remains, not just in Quebec, but around the world, a symbol for those who believe in the triumph of the Sacred Heart and the kingship of Christ over society.
Yeah, wow, I didn't know all that. I just thought it's cool that the Sacred Heart's on a flag.
Oh, no, no. You'll see a lot of tricolors, in particular, French, Belgian, etc., will put the Sacred Heart on the flag.
Okay. So if you'd like to get this, for me it's a wall tapestry. We sell it at our Teespring store. I'll put the link up on the screen right now. So yeah, no, it was our graphic designer did a great job. I was thinking of having him do a couple other things. I don't know if people would be interested. But one of the things that I was considering was the Habsburg coat of arms as a wall tapestry. I don't know what people would like that. Would you like that, Charles?
I'd love that, especially if it were, such a, I could put it up alongside this one.
Yeah.
And and of course, there are others you might look at, the old French coat of arms, the old French flag, whether the white or the blue version. These are all lovely. Even some of the Spanish flags, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you really should put up the flag of the two Sicilies, your ancestral banner.
Ah, of course, of course. So yeah, if you guys have an opinion on what we should do, just say it in the comments, and I'll see, and we'll see what happens. Okay, on to the questions.
Okay.
All right, first question is from Louis Philippe. Charles, why do you prefer the Legitimist claim to the French throne over the Orleanist claim? Wasn't it understood during the Bourbon Restoration that the Orleans were the next in line for succession and not the Spanish Bourbons?
Well, certainly Louis Philippe himself, the one after whom you've taken the name, thought so. The Comte de Chambord apparently was the last of the French line. Is said to have had other thoughts. The basic legal issue here, there's several different things in play. The first is that the Spanish Bourbon, from whom the Legitimist claimant descends, their progenitor renounced his claim to the throne of France, with the understanding, however, that this was to ensure that the thrones of France and Spain would never be united. Well, fade in, fade out. The Orléans, of course, betrayed the royal France repeatedly, but they remained princes of the blood. And to be extremely fair, they got somewhat better after the main line died out. The Count of Paris, who just died, Henri VII, he would be if he were French king, Henri VII. He actually consecrated France to the Sacred Heart about a month before he died. Very laudable thing. And don't think that my legitimism in any way implies a dislike of the current Orleanese claimant. I certainly do not dislike him this much. But the fact also remains that it's a little bit of a twisted history. They usurped the throne. The Legitimists will come up with all sorts of arguments to counter their arguments as to why the Orléans do not meet the legal criteria of the laws of France, and I am not really in a position to argue them one way or the other. But what I can say is that the question of the union of the thrones of France and Spain won't come into play. After the Comte de Chambord died, the senior head of the House of Bourbon was the Carlist claimant to the throne of Spain. But the Carlists themselves died out in 1936, leaving the next senior, the younger branch of the Spanish Bourbons. Here's where it gets funny. The last king of Spain, before Juan Carlos, Alfonso XIII, had two sons, Don Juan, who was the younger, and Don Jaime, who was the older. Now, Don Jaime was like Tommy in the opera by The Who, the deaf, dumb, and blind kid who sure played a mean game of pinball. In that, Don Jaime was deaf and dumb. and blind. He was deaf. He was deaf and blind anyway. I don't know that he was dumb. At any rate, nobody thought that he would get married or anything else. So his father prevailed upon him to surrender his rights to the throne of Spain. And those in turn passed to his younger brother, Don Juan, who was the father of Juan Carlos, who became King of Spain after Franco died, and so the grandfather of the current King of Spain. But Don Jaime did not surrender his claims to the throne of France.
Okay.
Neither did he pursue them. Now, it so happened that in the 1960s and 70s, the Count of Paris, who just died, his father, Henry VI, the former Count of Paris, started getting very wild. Broke up with his wife, crazy things, and disaffected a lot of his followers. It was at that time that Don Alfonso, Don Jaime, and father of the current claimant, began to think seriously about going after the throne of France. The Legitimist Party really came into being. There had always been a few of what they call the Blancs d'Espagne, the whites of Spain. But there wasn't really a big organized movement the way it became. So Alfonso died on the 1989. On January the 30th, he was literally beheaded. Skiing accident. So the current gentleman became the heir, and he has done his best to project himself as the rightful heir. Now, one of the things that has really frustrated the return of the monarchy in France is, of course, this very issue. And you have, and not just the Legitimists and the Orleanists, but you have a couple of other varieties of French monarchists as well. The Fusionists, who are Legitimists, but have decided Orléans are the people they're going to back. And then you have the Providentialists, who say that the rightful King of France will be made known by God at the right time. Well, you know, but honestly, and then of course, just to muddy the waters a bit further, there is the Bonapartist descendant,
Okay.
who of course would like to be Emperor of the French, but he's a Bourbon of the two Sicilies on his mother's side, so he too descends from.
Okay.
So, I personally would just like to see the French monarchy restored. But remember that one of the things that made things a bit difficult was that the Legitimist line, the Legitimist claimants, stood for a traditional French monarchy. It would be Catholic, where the king would rule as well as reign, and it would have provincial liberties and all that. The end of the centralized French state, which the revolution ushered in. The Orleanists have always stood, traditionally, for a liberal monarchy like England's. Now, the last gentleman, the last Comte de Paris, who just died on actually the anniversary of Louis XVI's murder, this January 21st, he was going to go to a mass commemorating Louis XVI, but he felt ill. He had to call and say he wasn't coming, and then he died.
Wow.
So, and as I say, the month before, he had consecrated France to the Sacred Heart.
Okay.
I would like to see all the different branches of the House of Bourbon reconciled with each other, and I would like to see a king crowned at Reims and ruling from Paris. I think that would be a wonderful thing for everyone, not least those of us of Francophonie in Outre-mer. But of the two, I think Louis XX has the better claim. But who could settle such a problem? Really, only the two heirs themselves. And it's my fervent hope to come to some sort of between them.
Okay. Okay, next question is from Stephen. Is Christianity a white man's religion? Almost all of Christianity has been influenced by the Mediterranean, white people. Whites historically have held a sort of monopoly on Christian theology. Even in Egypt, it was the Greeks there that controlled the church. My ancestors relied on theology coming from Syrian theologians rather than our own theologians. I'm a descendant of St. Thomas Christians from Kerala. So to get to the point, why should I, as a non-white, accept your religion when it clearly has no place for me?
I dispute that completely. If you have a soul and you're going to die, then it has a place for you. If not, then there's only one other place for you, heaven or hell. There have been an incredible number of non-white saints and martyrs in the church. The whole idea of racial theology. I mean, there are a lot of Europeans who would tell you that the Syrians aren't white. There are a lot of, I mean, it is, I don't mean to be unkind, but it sounds like the argument of a white supremacist. Now, I'm not suggesting the questioner is a white supremacist. I'm sure he's an Indian of St. Thomas Indians. But it's as though he had accepted the argumentation of white supremacists to be true.
You mean vice versa, right?
No.
It seems like he's complaining that it's a white man's religion and has no
right,
place for him.
Exactly. But that it's a white man's religion that has no place for him is what a white supremacist would say.
Okay. It's what a white supremacist would say to this gentleman.
Yes, he would say, it's a white man's religion. There's no place for you.
I see.
Now that could only be true. So what I'm saying is, it sounds to me as though he's accepted the argumentation of his own enemies.
I see. That's interesting.
Now, if he doesn't have his, people do that. People do that all the time. I mean, you know, how many non-whites are told that they have no place in this country, in that country where you are, the United States, and that there's no way they can be decent Americans. One hears that, and if you hear it often enough, you may fall into the trap of believing it. The truth of the matter, however, I knew King Kigali of Rwanda, King Kigali V, one of the finest Catholics I've ever known. Put a lot of lily white Catholics to shame. Theology knows no nation and no blood. The proof of the pudding are these so-called 3 pillars of the Church of China. 3 very Chinese theologians, of whom I'm sure that very few in my audience will have heard. And in fact, there's certainly a body of Kerala theologians to say, well, it would originate from Syria. The faith has to come somewhere from somewhere. I mean, I might as well say, well, because it came from, as the Nazis did, Christianity is a Jewish religion. And so it has no place for Gentiles. I mean, you go down that particular rabbit hole, and you are going to end up in one very strange wonderland, and go to hell on top of it if you die thinking that.
I mean, my 2 favorite cardinals in the College of Cardinals right now are from the African continent. It's Cardinal Sarah and Cardinal Arinze.
Yep.
And they're holding the whole thing together. I was I think in Dictator Pope, the book, what is it, Cardinal Marx, I think, the German liberal, he was complaining that these Africans don't compromise on anything.
No,
you can't reason with them.
Well, no, not when you're a worthless bit of scum like him.
You know, if I was Cardinal Arinze or if I was Cardinal Sarah, I would charge Cardinal Marx with racism with that statement.
Oh, sure. And of course, Cardinal Ranji in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, there's a brilliant theologian. So I'm afraid that it sounds to me like my questioner has been handed a bill of goods by a moron.
That's a good dissection. I think that's accurate.
And
So,
all I is that the devil can wear a white skin. The devil obviously wants him to believe that there's no place for him in the church because of his color. But let me tell you, my Indian godson, who I just confirmation sponsor for, he is a high caste Hindu from Bengal, a Brahmin. Read himself into the church. Brilliant kid. Converted despite the difficulties that the authorities in India and certain dioceses put in the way of converts. So, again, I think my correspondent is deluded in the sense that, well, he's swallowed the poison.
Okay. Well, hopefully this will help him realize what just happened.
I hope so. I mean, obviously, if you think that color is more important than creed, the color is more important than soul, and when we die, we'll all be the same color. Green.
Green?
That's what the flesh looks like after a while.
What are you talking about?
I'm babbling uncontrollably. No. When we're dead, we're all piles of meat and disembodied souls.
Okay.
So all those other things go bye-bye. The question is, are you bound for, bearing purgatory in mind, or are you bound for hell? That's the only question. Color, nationality, everything else is secondary to that basic question: heaven or hell, Christ or Satan.
I've been binging on Father Ripperger talks, and he made a funny point: how God loves diversity. Just look at how many different types of bugs he made.
Oh, for sure.
So the notion, it's a strange notion from this gentleman here. Okay, next question is from Nate.
Hello, Nate.
How do you think Prince Charles will run the British monarchy when Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II passes away? Will it be good or bad from your perspective?
Well, he hasn't really consulted me, so it'd be difficult for me to tell you just off the top of my head. But if people will focus upon certain lacunae in his thinking, such as population. But these are lacunae shared by virtually everybody in positions of authority today.
What are you saying? He's neo-Malthusian?
To some degree.
Okay.
Everybody yaps about population.
I see.
Which is a big defect in his thought. You bet. But if you read his writings, as I have done, even when he talks about, for instance, everyone gets excited about his saying he wants to be defender of faiths or defender of faith rather than defender of the faith. They get all bent out of shape. You got to bear a few things in mind. One is he is painfully aware that Anglicanism is now a minority religion in England. He is also painfully aware of the advances of secularism in England, which he sees in much the same way as various of our own popes have seen at the UN. They've seen all believers of any kind as being in some sort federated against the forces of secularity. How true that is another issue.
Okay.
But he also has to deal with the simple reality that he will have a lot of Muslim subjects, and he has to deal with them, just as the emperors of Austria had to deal with their Muslim and Jewish subjects, and they did, even though they didn't become any one whit less Catholic. He certainly has a feeling for architecture and literature and the environment and all sorts of things that I would certainly agree with. So the question is, when he becomes king, will he be as assertive as he's been as Prince of Wales? There's an interesting possibility, an interesting way we might possibly gauge that question. Have you ever heard of something called the Black Spider letters?
No.
Well, he has kind of an odd handwriting in black ink. Now, what has happened over many, many years is that various people would write him, private citizens, about problems they were having with the government, with differences of the government. And if the issue at hand caught his fancy, he would write to the segment of government concerned and ask for an explanation. And sometimes he actually got something done on the problem involved. Well, these were called the Black Spider letters. Now, the media have given him the reputation of being a moron, which, coming from the media, talking about the pot calling the kettle black, but I'll let that go. Anyway, well, you could also say takes one to know one. They're so stupid themselves, they can always tell when someone else is stupid. You can say that on their behalf, perhaps. I don't know. Anyway, but the thing is that up until a couple of years ago, it was considered that all communications between the prince and the government were privileged. But the Guardian, which is the leading lefty newspaper in England, went to court to force the government to reveal the Black Spider letters. Obviously, hoping was that they would make the prince look like an idiot. Oddly enough, the prince's people did not intervene in the lawsuit at all, and when asked would say, "Oh, this is strictly between the government and the Guardian. The prince can't be involved." And so the Guardian prevailed at court, and the Black Spider letters were made public. You can read them online. And they make the prince look very, very bright, and the government and successive government ministers look very stupid. So the real reason...
That is like reminiscent of the young Pope.
A little bit, yeah.
Where they're trying to blackmail the Pope with these letters, and then it just made him more popular.
It did. So he was really, he showed himself to be a lot smarter than his mother's government. So looking at all of that, to the degree that you can predict anything of this sort, because traditionally, I mean, there has not been a Prince of Wales like him since Edward VII was Prince of Wales, simply because he's been in the job so long. His mother having been around forever. But I would say there's a fair chance he will be a more aggressive king in a positive sense than his mother has been queen. I certainly hope so. Yeah. And I do not...
No, yeah, I've noticed you've made social media posts on his defense over the years.
I sure have. And I disagree with maybe 25%, 20% of what he holds. But that still means I agree a lot more with him than I do with most of the people I've had to elect.
It's interesting.
Well, you see, that's the thing. I mean, you say, well, the prince accepts birth control. Yeah, okay. Let's compare him to our civil leadership, shall we? Oh, did it not change us? I mean, if you want to compare the prince to some perfect, ideal Catholic monarch, he's a loser. You're right. If you want to compare him to anything you yourself have actually lived under, he's a lot better.
Okay.
Never let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes.
Well, it can't be repeated times. No, I'm against everybody who isn't perfect. Except me. So I couldn't do that. That would be self-hatred.
Okay, next question is from a lady named Patty.
Hello, Patty. Are you a lady? Never mind. Of course you are. You're a lady named Patty. All right. What can we do for Patty?
Let me preface this by saying that I am a young convert to the faith. My mum is a Presbyterian minister, and the rest of the family believes likewise. Studying doctrines such as extra ecclesiam nulla salus, I am quite worried about the eternal salvation of my parents and brothers, as I feel that God has entrusted their souls in part to me. I want to evangelize them, but I am not sure how to go about it. Do you have any advice? Should I worry about family cohesion, or should I be as unapologetically Catholic as possible, trying to discuss doctrine with them every chance I get?
Well, I don't know your family, and I don't know their personalities. So, take a study of them carefully. See what it is that they respond to. You're absolutely right in that you have a reason to be worried about them, and you have to pray very strongly for their conversion. You have to remember that they will want every possible excuse to disagree with you. So a lot, because it's family, a lot of past grievances will go into their resistance to the faith. Well, you know, Catholicism can't be true because you slapped me at the family outing 17 years ago. I mean, honestly, it'll never be put quite that way, but that can be the level. I don't know your family, I don't know you, so I don't know, but look and see what makes them tick. How deeply attached to Presbyterianism are your brothers? What are their questions about? What are their problems? What are their concerns? Now, remember that as a minister, your mother has a vested interest, and that's very, very hard to top. It really is. But there are a lot of things you could do without necessarily provoking a war. You can ask her questions intended to make,
questions intended to what?
Make her think.
Oh, okay.
In other words, if John Calvin correct about predestination? Well, if was John Knox correct about predestination? Ask historical questions about Presbyterianism and Calvinism in general. If, for instance, your mother is not, well, I guess I don't think I have female clergy amongst the Orthodox Presbyterians. So I'm betting she's one of the more liberal denominations. But if they've given up, if she is, and they've given up predestination, what purpose do they have in existing? Those sorts of questions. If our Lord said, "Unless a man eat my body and drink my blood, he shall have life in him," what does that mean from the Presbyterian point of view? That kind of stuff. So you can ask questions. Also, make sure to invite them all to anything and everything you do that's Catholic. You're converts, so you may or may not have a confirmation coming up. You may have your first communion, this kind of thing. Be sure to invite them. Invite them to particularly beautiful liturgies. Christmas, Epiphany, Candlemas, Easter, the Vigil, etc., etc., etc. Now, whether or not you should drop the bomb on them, that depends again on personality. Some people do better with that than they do with all the subtlety in the world. Other people, it turns off. You got to try to figure out which your people are. But look at it purely in terms of what will be the most effective.
Okay. This is a very important question. This is probably one of the most important questions I think you've ever received. For me, I'm inescapably surrounded by good Catholics. I'm in a very, very different situation. But talking to so many of your young fans, so many young gentlemen come from families that they've converted and they're the only Catholic in their family.
Yep.
And it's a tough situation, to say the least, for some of these. Some of these people have Protestant parents who are like banning sacramentals and are very hostile. So, are there any universal sort of advice? It sounds like you have to tailor each approach to your unique situation.
Well, you do. I mean, that's what St. Paul tells us. I'm all things to all men. That was why.
Was that a bit of your advice to invite them to liturgy? Would that be universal? Could anybody do that regardless?
Well, I mean, unless if the person is just going to slam the door in your face, maybe yes, maybe no. If it's going to make it worse, maybe yes, maybe no. But maybe it's what they need. I mean, you've also got to pray a lot to the Holy Ghost for guidance on this. But remember that you're in the position that a lot of Catholics were in the late Roman Empire. All right, the first Catholic in your family. Well, a lot of people had that experience, say about AD 183, AD 90, AD 204. A lot of Catholics in Rome went through that. And all you can do is the best you can do.
Okay, so one idea just popped into my head. What about, because I'm remembering our talk on the green scapular. What about you slip the scapular into the house? Would that work for everybody? Your whole family?
Everyone can do it, of course. Everyone should do it if they could do so without being observed.
Because for those of you who haven't seen this segment and this question on the green scapular, Charles stated that its special feature compared to the brown scapular, its unique feature is you can just have it in the household and the person doesn't need to wear it, and it sort of brings down graces and blessings on whoever's household that is. Is that correct?
That is correct. So the green scapular can be your great friend. And again, I know there are a lot of people out there with a lot of great difficulties. And of course, some of you will have parents who are ex-Catholics, and they're the worst.
Yeah.
They're because they know it all, Oh, I know all about that. I went to Catholic school for 12 years, and it's all garbage. I know that. Well, I'm willing to admit that their 12 years of Catholic school was all garbage. That I will sign on with them about.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously just a lot of praying. Any specific prayers to come to mind? Just rosaries?
Come Holy Ghost.
Oh, okay.
Rosaries, yes, but Come Holy Ghost is a very important prayer, because the Holy Ghost is your big ally in this fight. And also Our Lady, because she wants to see all her children saved. And that, that perforce includes your...
Okay.
But it's very, very hard, and don't beat yourself up over how badly or how well they do your best and hope for the best.
Okay. Okay, next question is from Sylvain Duran. Greetings again, fellow papists. Although it is becoming increasingly more difficult to remain one, it is no secret that the current pontiff is sorely testing the faith of traditional Catholics who are doing their best to avoid the trap of sedevacantism.
Woohoo!
Even EWTN is criticizing the Pope, and the definition of infallibility is getting narrower each time a problematic statement is issued from Rome. In Charles's opinion, what would constitute the red line, which, when crossed, would invalidate the claims of indefectibility of the church.
Oh, the Pope going for a sex change. No, not that. The thing you've got to bear in mind when you say it gets narrower, that's not true. People had a hugely inflated idea of what infallibility is. And what this pontificate is doing is deflating that particular balloon. You know, one of the things before Francis was that you had what my friend Chuck Wilson, the head of the St. Joseph Foundation, called creeping infallibilism, where, you know, people were willing to give the mantle of infallibility not just the extraordinary magisterium, but the ordinary magisterium, and then that was, you know, anything a pope said, and anything he wrote, and it began to include what Francis put out, you know, and no one could tell you, and they still can't tell you, what the boundaries of the ordinary magisterium are. Nobody has an answer to it. And there's no question of the ordinary magisterium being infallible. It's not. You always have to refer back to the extraordinary magisterium, and that is rarely exercised. So to answer your question concretely, when was the last time infallibility was invoked? It was not invoked for Vatican II. We were told very expressly by John the 23rd, who opened the council, and Paul VI, who closed it, that infallibility was not invoked for Vatican II. The only ecumenical council of which that could be said. So, when was the last actual exercise of infallibility? 90, when Pope Pius XII defined the doctrine of the Assumption of Our Lady into heaven.
What year?
1950. Now, what would be my red line? My red line would be if the Holy Father attempted to define, using the standard procedure, ex cathedra, intending to bind the whole of the church, claiming that it is part of the already revealed deposit of faith, a heresy. But I can no more conceive of Pope Francis doing that than I can of getting a straight answer out of him.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine.
But that's my red line. And I very, very much doubt that he would ever dream of trying to make an infallible statement. Now, mind you, he could say it's infallible, but then not do the thing. Like he was, I forget what it was now, but he referred to something really silly as apostolic. But it had no definition. It didn't mean anything.
Was it the adding the taking care of the environment as part of a corporal work of mercy?
Yeah, I think it was that.
Yeah, that was one of the weird things.
But he says this stuff, but he doesn't know a lot. You know, he as I've had to repeat over and over again, you have to remember that he is a product of the time when the Jesuits were dismantling their educational system. That's why he uses big words like Neo-Pelagian, and he often doesn't seem to know what they mean. You know, I mean, that's just the way it is. Because words do have meanings, you see. And even if he's the Pope, he can't simply come out and say, you know, the problem of all Canadian right-wingers is that they're really pythons. Well, no, a python is a snake. You see? And if he were to say that, then he's either trying to engage in magic or he doesn't really know what a python is.
I sometimes like his big words. I think you're being a fomenter of coprophagia right now, Charles.
Well, that may be. That may be. The fact that he knew that word and enjoyed using it makes you wonder.
That tripped me out. That
Yeah,
was fun.
he's and that would be my red line if he had to if he tried to define coprophagia as a revealed truth of the faith. I would definitely say that the seat is vacant.
Wow.
But no, so that's my red line, and I highly doubt he's ever going to get anywhere near it.
Okay.
You see, what's hard for people to understand is that if history is any guide, we can have bad popes, stupid popes, evil popes, crazy popes. We have done. And if we have done, we can do. Now, obviously, we're not in the best position to evaluate this pontificate because we're living in it. 200, 300 years, people have a much better handle on the whole thing than we can. But unfortunately, we live in the here and now, and so we have to deal with what's here and now. But we always have to remember that our judgments are contingent. And I would not be entirely surprised if at some point in the far future out that he's completely on the side of the angels and knew exactly what he was doing all along. I find that hard to believe, but I have to be willing to accept the fact that I may have completely misread him.
Okay. Right, next question is from Henry James. Why does the church not ordain women? Is it not sexist that it does not?
No, it is not sexist. Firstly, as with our friend from India, trying to apply cheap contemporary politics to the changeless teachings of the faith is a crazy game.
It's not politics. It transcends politics. This is American principles of equality.
That's what I said.
What? Our
American principles of equality. You know what? When you can move in with any Supreme Court justice you want and enjoy eating their food and drinking their booze, then we'll have equality in this country.
Wow.
Until then, it's all nonsense.
Okay.
No, the truth of the matter is, for whatever reason, Christ decided that he would ordain, consecrate only men as his apostles, and that's what he did. And the church, as St. John Paul II pointed out so clearly, has no authority, no power to change that. It just doesn't.
Okay.
Just as the church has no right to change using bread and wine at the Mass to me and Coca-Cola. It just doesn't have that right. Oh, so what are they? What are they, vegans? That they won't use meat at communion? I mean, it's closer to what was actually used the first time at the Last Supper, not Last Supper, at the crucifixion. Well, and what about real blood? You know, okay. The church has no authority to change what she's been given. That's a lesson that the Holy Times needs to remember. Because the church doesn't have authority over something to change certain things, neither does the Pope.
Yeah, well, I think this is I think this gentleman might be subject to sort of Americanism, where it's like, well, you know, we just, you know, it's like the headline, Pope changes teaching on the death penalty. Pope changes Catholic, you know, like just a couple people, you know, could speak out, so maybe a couple prelates, and then suddenly church teaching changes. They don't seem to understand that truth is truth, regardless of, you know, it's not true because the Catholic Church says it. It's true because it's the Catholic Church says it because it's true. As you said. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing, too, the whole sexism thing, I find invidious. And what does that really mean? You know, men can't be mothers. Isn't that sexist?
I know.
Oh, and then I read something recently, today, in fact, that just set me off laughing. A newspaper article was complaining that a disproportionate number of LGBTQ people are HIV sufferers. They're HIV patients.
Well, that's not anything new. That's
Well, no, that's not my point. A disproportionate number, saying that somehow somebody has done something terrible to make it so that the majority of HIV sufferers are gay. Let's put this another way. What if I said, isn't it terrible that a disproportionate number of smokers have lung cancer?
Yeah. Wow. That is, why should I be surprised? Why should I be surprised?
It's crazy.
Yeah, I shouldn't be surprised.
A disproportionate number of swimmers drown. If you don't go into the water, you'll never drown.
It's in government reports. I've looked this up. I mean, in terms of the behavior and what happens with the behavior.
Well, we know that's the primary cause of it. Now, mind you, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying they deserve it. Nothing like that at all. And God knows, I'm certainly not happy with smokers getting lung cancer. That's not my point. My point is, the way it's presented is as though this was some sort of injustice for whom someone was responsible. It's just the way it is. And, a disproportionate number of gamblers in Vegas go into heavy debt. We are engaged in a revolt against reality.
The government, the government is not out for the public good anymore either. Everyone's worried about health. I saw a new thing where the growth of STDs is skyrocketing because of these new dating apps that promote the hookup culture. It used to be a fairly moderate slope. Now it's like whoop, because of these dating apps that it's just getting transmitted like so much more rapidly. But I guess that's the public good, right? I mean, this is just par for the course, right? I mean, this is what everyone wants. This is our pursuit of happiness, right? Everyone has the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So there you go.
They do indeed. And if happiness is an STD, what you gonna
do? Yeah, I guess so. Okay. So, all right, next question by Anthony Giovacchini. I was wondering if you could recommend some good Catholic charities. Do you have some favorites in mind?
Well, there are three different sorts. I mean, your favorite shrines can always use money. Your favorite Catholic educational institutions can use money. Your favorite religious orders and monasteries need money. And as far as charities, just as charities go, your best bet is to give to local Catholic charities like your local St. Vincent de Paul, your local Knights of Columbus, your local Catholic War Vets, whatever is going on locally, that's where you should put your money.
Okay.
And if you happen to be a dweller in one of those dioceses that's really sound, give them some dough. Basically, the gravy train should be a reward for good behavior.
Yeah, that's been, I think Church Militant and a couple other Catholic organizations, maybe Regina Magazine, have been espousing that we need to be switching where our money goes and punish bad behavior, reward good behavior.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't forget, too, devotional societies like the Confraternity of the Precious Blood and the Honor Guard of the Sacred Heart and things like that. The Gebetsliga for Kaiser Karl.
Oh, wow.
Just thought I'd get that out
Some of that Austro-fascist propaganda just seeping out of you. Wow.
So.
Wow.
That's my intellectual response. So, at any rate, no, I would definitely I would definitely look at that aspect of things. There are Catholic retirement schemes. Look at what really benefits and spreads the faith. Is my advice.
Yeah, good advice. Okay, next question is from Donald Goodwin.
Oh boy.
Is there anything of value a Catholic can find in Eastern philosophy?
No. No, that's a little too simple. Let's put it this way. Eastern philosophy has actually led some, and by that we mean various Hindu, Buddhist, etc. Philosophies, have led some people into the faith, but they've led a lot more out of it. If it's led you into the faith, fine and dandy. But Catholicism has all the understanding of reality you need. The problem is that Eastern philosophies are particularly flawed with regard to whatever reliance they put on karma and reincarnation and so on. Completely distorts reality.
They have great meditation styles, though. I mean, that's what Thomas Merton said. I think he criticized Christian meditation in general and said we could learn a lot from those Eastern religions in terms of how they meditate. What do you think of that?
I think Thomas Merton was a very foolish man.
How could you say, whoa, ad hominem? Whoa. How could you say
that's an ad hominem attack. But in his case, by the fruits you shall know them. And you see, the ad hominem question is when you're talking about intellectual arguments. When you're talking about spirituality, the behavior of the person is very important. Thomas Merton, he had an illegitimate kid off his dental assistant while he was a monk. He was not someone I would emulate. He wrote one good book, and then he died in weird circumstances. I mean, he was a messed up fellow.
What was his good book?
No, The Seven-Story Mountain.
Oh, okay. You read it?
Yeah, I had to. I didn't have a choice.
It sounds like you regretted his good book.
Well, it's a little bit like reading Tertullian, the church father, when you know he ended up as a Montanist. In other words, when you read a good work by someone when you know what happened to them later.
It's sort of sad.
Yeah, it makes you sad. I mean, Luther wrote some perfect stuff. But
Luther wrote what?
Some perfect Catholic stuff. And Henry VIII wrote in defense of the seven sacraments. And the problem is, that you read it and you're like, ugh. It doesn't matter how good they were. For that matter, it's like when you read a really neat book like Confederacy of Dunces. Funny book. I really enjoy it. I love the book. But I can never escape the fact that its author committed suicide.
Yeah. I don't have that problem for Hemingway.
I don't like Hemingway, so I don't either.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, next question. Kind of similar question from Joshua. I'm wondering what Charles's opinion on Confucianism is.
Well, Confucianism is, of course, a huge part of Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese culture. And it's a philosophy, really, not a religion. A set of attitudes, even, you might call it. It is not... It's almost like the American religion in the sense of treating the supernatural as something that exists but can't really be understood. It just has to be taken as given. So Confucius made the famous statement, how can we, who know so little of earth, claim to know anything of heaven? Confucian ethics, etc., are certainly reconcilable with Christianity. You know, again, I'm sorry to bag on our Indian friend again, but there are any number of Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese Catholic philosophers and theologians who have worked very hard on reconciling Confucius with the faith. I mean, not his person, but the teachings, to greater or lesser success.
Okay.
So, but see, again, Confucius is not on about karma, etc. He skips that whole aspect of things. His is entirely about behavior. And one of the things that the Confucian gentleman is required to be is pious, devout. But that could be anything.
I see. Okay, next question is from Brian. I have recently become a monarchist. What books would you recommend that go into the subject of monarchism for the beginner?
Well, on the Tumblr House books, on the Tumblr House website, there is a fascinating bibliography that's an extended bibliography to Star Spangled Crown. I would recommend all the books in that bibliography for any beginner. You read all them things and you'll come out an absolute neophyte monarchist, ready to argue with anybody or put them to sleep alternatively.
There you go. Go to the Star Spangled Crown book page, search for that, and then it'll be somewhere in the description, the link to the bibliography. And so just click that, and there you go. Okay, next question is from Frosty.
The snowman was a happy jollies.
What is your opinion on Oswald Mosley's fascism, since he was happy to let the monarchy overrule his decisions? And could his ideology be a valid compromise for both monarchists and fascists?
Woof! Whose was the face that launched 1,000 ships? Sir Oswald Mosley or Sir Stafford Cripps? Well,
you don't want to compromise?
Mosley.
Uh-oh.
He had some very good ideas, but the whole black shirt thing, and even the use of the name fascism, it's kind of a turnoff for me, I have to admit. Fascism, you see, again, how do I say this? Italian fascism was very popular in a lot of places for several reasons. One, because it undoubtedly revitalized Italy for a while. There's a reason Italy escaped the Depression. Mussolini accomplished some things in office. That was why commentators from Franklin Roosevelt to Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican back to Africa man, praised Mussolini before he took up with Hitler, before he invaded Ethiopia. And that was why Mosley took on the whole British Union fascist thing. He was a little too friendly with Hitler for my taste. And I remember his wife, Lady Diana, lived 30 or 40 years longer than he did. And I heard her on the radio. She was being interviewed, and she was asked, "Lady Mosley, after after all the years that have passed, what do you think of Adolf Hitler?" And she said in this beautiful interwar P.G. Woodhouseian accent, "He was a perfect dare."
Okay.
And, fascism, like Nazism, was very much a movement of the left. To get to power, Mussolini had to make certain compromises with the church but these were not really native to fascism. And in fact, it's interesting to note that it was the king that deposed him. And And then when he started the Italian Social Republic in the north of Italy, then fascism was able to become itself without any compromise. Mosley was not a stupid man by any means. But I mean, the BUF, the British Union of Fascists, was too many thugs for my taste.
Too many thugs. Wow.
Too many thugs. Too left wing in the sense of being. But you see, Mosley was an interesting character because he was torn between traditional British conservatism and the demands of a new age, which he saw fascism as fulfilling. So for a lot of people in his position, the idea was that fascism was something that could take those traditional qualities and reinvigorate them and make them dominant now, as against communism.
That makes sense.
As against socialism. Yeah. I mean, basically it was seen as a kind of shortcut. But instead of a shortcut, it became a blind alley.
Wow.
Now, to be fair, and this drama in different, depending on whether it's occupied by the Germans or not, and includes Germany, the conservatives of Europe as a whole had to face this issue in every nation. Collaboration and resistance to the Nazis. And neither alternative worked for the European right. You take Austria here where I'm sitting. The biggest chunk of the resistance were the monarchists. And you know what they got for it?
Yeah.
In Italy, same. You had a huge chunk of the resistance of the partisans who were monarchists and Catholic. You know what they got for it?
What they got?
So, nada. So, what's interesting today is that when you look at what had been the traditional European right in histories of that time, they're basically addenda to the stories of the collaborators, the real collaborators, who tended to come from left-wing backgrounds, and the resistance, who tended to come from left-wing backgrounds.
I see.
But in neither case, for the most part, were the traditional European right pulling the cart.
Okay.
They had to decide which bad cart to get into. Who are you going to ally with? Uncle Joe Stalin or Uncle Adi Hitler? Your call.
Yeah.
If I ever get the chance, I'd love to write a book on this very issue. The European right between resistance and collaboration.
Sounds like a good book.
We'll see.
Okay, next question from Joe. Mr. Coulombe, can you explain the relationship between the church and state in the Habsburg dynasty? The Habsburgs are often portrayed as exceptionally devoted, but there also seems to be large power struggles between the church and the monarchs, specifically between Charles V and Franz Joseph.
Well, I presume he means between the church and those two monarchs, because they lived hundreds of years apart.
Oh, yeah, probably.
So the idea that they were struggling with each other is difficult. Well, Joseph II would be a really good example, because he was the only Habsburg who was somewhat anti-Catholic. And he really tried to hijack the church to his own ends. But to answer the question, you got to bear in mind that the Habsburgs and the church sometimes had somewhat different agendas. So, for instance, Charles V, who, remember who he was. He was Charles V of the Empire. He was King of Spain. And under him, Mexico and Peru came into the empire. He was the first man upon whose empire the sun never set.
Mm.
Now, he was faced with several problems. The Ottoman Turks were attacking in Hungary in the east and in the Mediterranean with French assistance. The French were Catholic. The Protestant revolt was breaking out all over the northern part of his domain, and he had to try to put a stop to it. But remember the Protestant revolt, there was a period of ecclesiastical not unlike today.
Ecclesiastical what?
Decadence.
Oh, decadence. Okay.
Not unlike today. And so, basically, as not just with him, but with a lot of other well-intentioned laymen at the time, they wanted to see reform in the church. But, of course, successive popes were of the opinion that only a pope and only basically the clergy can only reform itself. Need any out. Now, of course, that's not an entirely historical view to take, because he has some, not least of which the ending of the Great Schism, but it's exactly outside lay help and took to put things to rights. But nevertheless, initially, the problem with church authorities over church decadence. Then came the Lutheran Revolt. Now, he was never at any time a friend of Luther, but he and the Roman authorities from time to time differed with how to deal with the Protestant menace. Then, to add insult to injury, several popes, including Clement VII, were allied to France, who were his enemies and aiding the Turks.
I see.
So, as a result, he found himself at war with the papacy in Italy, where the Pope was the ally of France.
Okay.
And that is why Charles V's armies took Rome. And that is why they sacked it. He didn't order them to sack it. His commander lost his armies, a chunk of whom were these self-same German Protestants. But that was not his intention. And it's interesting that the same Pope that fled from the Vatican after the slaughter of the Swiss Guards would later make another treaty with Charles V and would end up crowning him Holy Roman Emperor.
Yeah. So,
taking it a little bit further to Ferdinand II, who was emperor during most of the 30 Years' War. Ferdinand II had made a vow to the Virgin Mary when he was an Archduke in Styria that he would extirpate heresy from whatever domains God saw fit to give him. Then he became emperor. Well, gets into the 30 Years' War. The Swedes come to the aid of the Protestants, and the Pope at the time, Urban VIII, is anti-imperial, and he backs the French against and the Swedes against the emperor. And the Roman mob at the time were incensed, they were furious, and they said, the King of Sweden has more zeal for his heresy than does our Pope for the Holy Catholic faith, which alone can save us. So, when it came to Franz Joseph, he had the problem in that, left to himself, he was extremely pious, and he wanted the enforcement of the Concordat that gave the church so much power. But he had to conciliate the liberal politicians to some degree, especially after Austria's defeat in 1866. So that meant running afoul of the Vatican in a couple of things. But it wasn't a position he enjoyed being in.
Okay.
So, in other words, when the Holy See and the Habsburgs came into conflict, it was entirely for political rather than religious reasons.
I see. Okay. Good defense of the Habsburgs there. Okay.
Well, I mean, stop and think for a second. Imagine, if you will, that you had the Archduke Karl, or Kaiser Karl, and he ruled over all these lands of Central Europe. And he was a traditionalist.
Okay.
And we had Pope Francis.
I see. Yeah, then then he's separation of church and state. I get it. Okay. Good parallel there.
Except there is no separation of church and state. And so he and the Pope have, shall we say, a certain shared jurisdiction over things.
Right. Okay. Next question is from Samuel T. Burdick. I am a proud Catholic and monarchist. However, I am unable to find any real monarchist movement in the United States. Are you aware of any such movement? And if so, how may I contact them or become a member?
Well, that's a little bit difficult for several reasons. I mean, the counter-revolution, of course, as we know, is monarchist-minded. But the problem you face is that this country has no single monarchical tradition. That's something I dealt with in Star Spangled Crown. Parts of it were English, parts were French, parts were Spanish. And then, of course, Alaska was Russian, Hawaii had its own, and so on. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is that a Catholic monarchy in a non-Catholic country just isn't possible. If we have a Catholic country, we may one day hope to have a monarchy. But it will be an American monarchy, unlike anything else, just as a Catholic America would be unlike anywhere else. As Catholic Italy is not like Catholic France, it's not like Catholic Spain, it's not like Catholic Portugal, it's not like Catholic England was or Catholic Finland was. Well, mind you, there are a lot of similarities, obviously. But a Catholic America would be as unrecognizable to us as Catholic France was to someone from Gaul.
Wow, that really excites the imagination. I can't imagine what a Catholic America. I mean, what would that look like?
I don't know. Set your mind to work at it.
Because we always just sort of imagine, it'll look more like France and Italy. But you're saying no.
No, not necessarily. I mean, it might. But again, it would be so different in so many ways. Because you got to bear in mind, so much of what we take for granted in everyday life is alien to the faith. You know?
Yeah.
Remember that most Americans see their loyalty to this country not in terms of loyalty to the country, but of loyalty to freedom or the ideology of the country or the idea of America.
Yeah.
Not the reality of America. That people really don't have patriotism for.
That's an important distinction.
It sure is. Because if you lose faith in the ideology, it is very tempting to begin to hate the country. I mean, for instance, take the flag. Now, on the one hand, the flag is supposed to represent all sorts of wonderful ideological freedom stuff. Well, whatever. But it is the flag that generations of Americans have fought and died for. So that gives it, to my mind, a certain value independent of the ideology.
Interesting.
Similarly, you know, as I'm sure you guess, aesthetically, I certainly love Europe. And it states that I was born. It's where generations of my family, certainly on my dad's side and some of my mother's anyway, have lived, and certainly all of them profited from. You know, we wouldn't be here if there weren't a reason.
Yeah.
Nobody came to America because everything was wonderful at home.
Right.
Now, mind you, often that the lack of wonderfulness at home was their fault.
Right.
But I mean, we inherited all the problem children. But also people who, there was lack of economic opportunity, or there was political or religious whatever, and so they came over, or they just couldn't make it over there and decided they'd come here for a fresh start. And even if they didn't make it over here, they nevertheless brought us here.
Yeah.
So, that is something that's worth honoring. What always got me in the song "My Country 'Tis of Thee" is the two lines: "Land of the Pilgrims' pride, land where my fathers died." Of the two, yeah, mustard for me.
Wait, of the two, what?
Of the two lines, "Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrims' pride."
Right.
You can guess which of those two. I couldn't care tuppence about the Pilgrim's Pride.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is the land where my fathers died.
I see.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. That you're separating the principles of America from the actual people of America.
Exactly.
And that the people of America is always a part of you, even even with Europe's rich traditions and all compared to America is always going to be a part of you.
Well, and the thing is, we are European. That's something we've lost sight of because of the ideology. We are as much a European nation as France or Italy. And so is Australia. So is Canada. So is Peru. So is Brazil. And for that matter, so is Russia. So are large chunks of South Africa and India. And we may not like to think of it that way. But what languages do we speak?
Yeah.
What religion do we hold? Where does all this come from? What legal systems do we follow? We are a part of that great, wonderful, beautiful European matrix. We're a strange part, a part that, one of the things in discussing this sort of stuff with my Indian godson that has certainly come to my mind is how much India and the United States are alike.
India and the United States?
Yeah.
Okay, how much are they alike?
Well, in certain ways, quite a bit. The very idea of India did not exist until the British created it. It's a Western construct.
It's interesting. Wow, I never thought of that. Yeah.
Well, no. But India and its sister nations of Pakistan and Bangladesh are artificial constructs by the British. And they have an ideology, a nationalist ideology, which could only come into existence through their British experience and education.
Wow.
And we're like that. Our American ideology is a creation of the British Enlightenment.
Wow.
Now, in both cases, they turned against their parent, but they couldn't have existed without the parent. And the funny thing is, although Indian civilization is so much older than ours, as a united thing, it's more recent than the United States and has far less unity than these United States do.
I see.
So, I mean, it's a difficult thing for India because she has to determine, are we about Hinduism, which would annoy a lot of people in India, or are we about this westernized ideology of Indian nationalism, which is secular, but kind of free-floating. And that Indian nationalist ideology is very much, in certain ways, like our American ideology.
Interesting. And so you think that's because of we have the same parent?
Yeah. The differences come from the fact that our populations are different and everything else is different.
Yeah.
But the similarities between our two countries come to the country.
Well, I have to say, emotionally, I have to completely reject what you're saying because no country is like America, okay? We are the greatest nation on earth.
You bet.
And for you to do a parallel with India to America, that's borderline sacrilegious right there.
I'm sorry. No, yeah, I'm sure that'll upset people, but the fact is that this country is unlike India, which is a whole thing. This country is a pile of really good building material that never has been arranged into a real country. And yet it is something. It's a thing. It's carried on a life for a couple of hundred years. It's like Pinocchio. But it would take the faith to make Pinocchio a real boy in this question.
I feel like there was a really clever euphemism stashed in there. Really good building material? That was like a pile of rubble or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but really top notch. Brought in from all over the world.
Okay.
It's not a bunch of crap somebody just dumped here. It's got some really good stuff, but it needs the Catholic faith to make this Pinocchio of the nations a real boy.
This Pinocchio of nations.
And if we ever do that, maybe we'll one day have a Catholic king.
Truth be told, I'm more interested in Catholic than the king side.
Yeah, well, you're not the questioner, are
you? Who's the questioner? What does that mean?
Well, the guy asked the question about Catholic monarchy in this country.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
See, he has precedence over you. You're the interlocutor, but he's the questioner.
Okay. Well, I control the narrative, Charles. I'm the you don't control the narrative. I control the narrative.
Well, suddenly you're beginning to sound like one of the control boys of the Outer Limits.
I'm aspiring to our modern media, and taking lessons from them, controlling the narrative.
You better have a lobotomy first so you can understand things the way they do.
Yeah, that's true.
Remember, good. Stupid is good.
Stupid is good. Got it. That's a new one. Okay, our final question today is from Fabio. I was wondering...
The model!
Yeah, maybe the model. You never know. I was wondering, are there any atheist monarchs out there? I'm an atheist myself, but I also just recently became a monarchist, and I was just wondering this.
Well, firstly, Fabio, let me say that we all appreciate your work. To answer your question, there have not been many atheist monarchists, and certainly very few atheist monarchs. Frederick the Great comes to mind. Very few. But a reason for this is that inevitably monarchy derives its legitimacy from the religion of the people over which it rules. The king is always, to some degree, king by the grace of God, even if he doesn't use the phrase. Having said that, there have been atheist monarchists from Bolingbroke to H.P. Lovecraft, who favored monarchy for the same reason they favored all sorts of national traditions and all that, for purely utilitarian reasons. In other words, it worked better than anything else. Now, to me, that's always seemed a tad hypocritical. Monarchy is good because people think it's by the grace of God, even though I don't believe in God. But I would also have to say that people like Bolingbroke and Lovecraft were not morons. So however they manage to square the circle for themselves, they did. And that is what I have to say to you, sir. So, rolling broken leg, there you go.
Is monarchy a function of Christianity? Is it a byproduct of Christianity?
Well, Christian monarchy is.
Christian monarchy is.
Monarchy is something like family life. It's a reality of humanity. It's a natural thing that the faith baptized and turned into something far better than it had been. I mean, similarly, chivalry is the warlike virtues that are natural.
Yeah, I see. I know chivalry is a function of Christianity, but I was wondering if monarchy. So monarchy isn't quite like chivalry.
Well, no, it is in the sense that chivalry built on a natural foundation, the war code of the Germanic tribes, but took it, baptized it, and made it infinitely better. So too with Christian monarchy. And again, to draw the chivalry analogy a little bit further, you compare chivalry to Bushido, the code of the Japanese samurai. Now, in certain areas, they resembled each other a great deal, actually. But in other areas, they didn't. So, and those were for religious reasons. So if a samurai came along and opened a sword and there was a peasant, you cut him in two. And that was great. And it was great for the peasant, too, because the law of karma, he would be reborn as something better, having helped the samurai realize his whatnot. But if the same behavior was tried under the code of chivalry, then that knight was a robber baron and needed to be smacked around, but good.
Yeah.
Well, similarly, in some ways, folk like the Byzantine Emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, resembled the Ottoman Sultan and the Chinese Emperor in certain areas, but in others different. Because in both cases, say with the Ottoman Sultan, who was also the Caliph of Islam, and the Chinese Emperor, who was the son of heaven and the head priest of the national cult, everyone existed for them. In Christian monarchy, there is a certain priestly element to it, but the king or the emperor is supposed to exist for his subjects, emulating Christ, you see.
Okay.
So, you know, in the case of the Ottoman Sultan, every one of his government ministers until the 19th century basically was a slave of the Sultan. He owned his ministers. And they could be very wealthy, they could have tons of slaves themselves, but they were considered to be his slaves, and if he wanted to, he could behead them like that. Like, but not like.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that does it for our question segment. Now it's book time.
Oh boy.
We have this is a very, very special book time this episode because it is in tandem with a video. The book today is Deliverance Prayers for Use by the Laity, published by Sensus Traditionis Press. It's Father Ripperger's press. This is a prayer book constructed by Father Ripperger. Now, the first thing that I want to say is, so it's in tandem with a 3-part video by Father Ripperger on generational spirits. And what are generational spirits, you might say? Generational spirits are, well, they're sort of, I guess you could say, demons, sort of the counter to guardian angels, I guess you could say. And these are demons that are passed down, that pretty much, Father Ripperger says, every family has these. And, you know, they create temptation or obsession or oppression, and in rare cases, possession. But this is a thing for pretty much every family that they need to try to get rid of. So I don't want to go into the specifics because Father Ripperger says this infinitely more effectively than I, and I also don't want to get his words wrong, but so he totally, through him, I finally realized what spiritual warfare is now. I didn't know what spiritual warfare is, and by listening to Father Ripperger, now I think I have a better idea. And these prayers in this prayer book, they're specific prayers to combat demons, and they're very much akin to, I guess you could say, the St. Michael's prayer, but they are more specific and elongated. And so I'm going to give I guess an example. There, I guess binding prayers, all sorts of different prayers, prayers of protection, prayers of rejection. There's a lot of anti-Freemasonry prayers. If you brought a curse of Freemasonry upon you, that there's a lot of prayers to counter that. Let me see if I can find a relatively short prayer here. Let's see here. Jesus, I ask thee to bind any evil spirits associated with any and all evil curses, pacts, spells, seals, hexes, vexes, triggers, trances, vows, demonic blessings, or any other demonic bondages sent against your name, or myself, or any of our loved ones, or any of our possessions. And I ask thee to bind all evil spirits separately and individually, and break all seals. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So you can see that the language is very specific. It lists it lists all the different types of things. And Father Ripperger says in spiritual combat, just as in normal combat, precision is everything. If you don't ask specifically, you don't get specifically. So I thought that was very interesting. I'll just summarize some of the interesting points of what Father Ripperger says in the video. I will provide the link to the video. But he says that generational spirits also are parts of movements. Just like how guardian angels have, there's guardian angels of a region, a city, over various things. So too, these generational spirits, they can be attached to, he says, a nation. Every race has one, a region, a corporation can get one, a diocese, or even a religious order. And one of the examples that he makes, I don't know how he discovered this, but he says Los Angeles has the demon of unreality. I have no idea. What do you think of that, Charles? Unreality.
I don't know what he means.
Well, it's like, oh, I see what you're saying. That makes sense, Criswell and everything,
Well, we certainly have been, when it comes to spiritual, we've certainly been a breeding ground of insanity for a century and a half at least. I mean, people come to LA and they come into any sort of weird cult imaginable.
He also said, I thought it was very interesting, he said the traditional movement has a specific demon. You want to guess what the traditional movement's demon is?
A Pharisee.
Well, close, actually. He said of criticism.
Yeah.
That's what he says. That's the demon attached to the traditional movement. Criticism. And you can, wow. I mean, he really nailed that one. I didn't need to be an exorcist and have these sort of experiences to say that one, because that's pretty obvious, pretty plain to see for our part.
Well, I mean, the problem for the Rat Trap is that nothing is perfect enough. And I mean, I go back to what I said earlier about Prince Charles. Very often things are not by any means everything you would like, but they're a chunk forward, a step forward, a chunk better than what you've already got. And again, if the I'm a legitimist, you bet, but if the Orléans were able to make a Catholic monarchy in France, I would certainly be very happy about that. I would rather see Britain and the Commonwealth ruled by a Jacobite-style king. You bet.
Mm.
But I'd settle for Prince Charles bringing a bit more sanity.
Yeah. So, you want to guess what the demon or demons of the United States is? The generation spirit?
Tell me.
He says it's fraud and avarice. He said that the initial purpose, the God-given purpose of the United States was sort of the material prosperity, which we are to extend to all nations. But we've sort of gotten away from, we haven't done that. We haven't executed it. And it's due to fraud and avarice. You know?
Well, don't forget that one of our earliest characters was the Yankee trader, the medicine show salesman. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. Have this here Dr. Golden silver elixir. Yes, indeed. Good for what ails you. It's opiated, 85% alcohol. Everything you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen. It'll cure chilblains, headaches, blah, 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 blah. And
there it is.
We have always been the great land for con men. Land speculation.
Yep.
I mean, you look at how many of our, from the Mississippi bubble to the Yazoo land fraud, our early history is filled with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, because A, I'm not an exorcist, and B, I have no special insight into these things.
Right.
But looking at it historically, there's an old saying in Italian, which in English is, if it's not true, it's at least appropriate.
What? Okay.
So
interesting. Okay. So I don't use this adjective often. I've used it once before for Dom. You're not going to believe me, but I've used it once before which was for Dom Garaget's liturgical year. I used the adjective life-changing, and his video and in tandem with this book, I feel is life-changing. It's going to completely. It's very eye-opening, and I haven't mentioned yet. This book is actually the best-selling book that isn't published by Tumblr House in our store, by far. Like several times. I don't even know what second place is. This is the absolute best-selling book in our store. That's not I guess it's second place to your books, because your books are best-selling books. But this is right there. I mean, people have called up to make orders. This one lady, she ordered 40 copies of this book. And other people have ordered like 10 copies. People are getting this book and they're just handing them out to people. And that tells me that their reaction is somewhat akin to mine. We're feeling the same way about this book. So watch the video. I'm going to link the video. Father Ripperger is going to say all these wonderful things. And then this book is the tool. This book is going to be the tool to help you out. It has a lot of prayers that you cannot find nowhere else. I've Googled some of these prayers on the internet because I was curious if these are public knowledge, and they're not. They're actually nowhere else on the internet, some of these prayers. So, yep, that's all. Go buy this book. Any last words, Charles, on anything?
Well, yes, actually. We just squeezed the last drops out of the Christmas season.
Yes.
Christmas is over. And I, for one, am not happy to see it go. But courage, my friends, courage, because we are now soon to be in Septuagesima, Carnival, Mardi Gras. Remember, if you're going to be keeping Lent strictly, celebrate Mardi Gras well. If you're not going to be keeping Lent strictly, you've got no cause to celebrate. So use this time to do two things. One, prepare to celebrate Lent as strictly as you can. Two, having done so, have a good Mardi Gras. But here's a suggestion. Make a point before Lent begins of deciding on which days you're going to relax it. Like, for instance, St. Patrick's Day, St. Joseph's Day, the Sundays, and the Annunciation. Do that now, because if you don't, during the course of Lent, especially as it gets later and later, you're going to come up with all sorts of interesting days to relax on. Oh, well, you know, it's St. Legius's day, and he's the patron of printers.
Yeah, of course.
My grandfather was a printer when he was a boy, so don't do that.
I'm actually even scared to pick days other than Sunday. Because that, for me, I'm so weak-willed that I feel like that would almost be a slippery slope, like St. Patrick's Day for me.
Not really. I mean, the three that I use are St. Patrick's, St. Joseph's, and the Annunciation.
Yeah.
I mean, those are pretty. It's hard to top those.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, you know, the perfect time for me. It only happens once in 7 years. Is when Saturday is St. Patrick's Day.
Why is that? What is what?
Well, Saturday I take off. Then comes Sunday. And then Monday is St. Joseph's Day.
Oh, wow. So that's your special little island break situation. And that's this year? Are you saying that's this year? Or you don't know?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
No, this year I'm kind of getting cheesed out.
Ah.
Because Sunday is St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, wow. That sucks. Okay, so that you don't get an extra day then. It's sort of, wow, what a sad
and
day.
the fun part about that, too, is that in the States, we actually have, for Pius XII, a permission to eat meat on Friday.
What?
On the Friday after St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, on the Friday after because of St. Patrick's Day. Okay.
All the corned beef that's been piled up.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Same with the Friday after Thanksgiving.
I see.
But but see, here in Austria, the likelihood of my getting a hold of any corned beef and cabbage is very unlikely.
Sad. I know you're an aficionado of corned beef and cabbage.
I'll say. There are certain things I do miss over here. I miss American breakfast.
Yeah, they have weird breakfast over. My brother was telling me, like, the way you guys eat eggs over there, like, is very different from here. You have it on a little egg holder, and the way you eat it, like, what is that all about? Well,
that's hard-boiled eggs. I mean, I had those when I was a kid. And I'm going to tell you a terrible truth.
What?
My grandfather hated soft-boiled eggs. If there was anything soft-boiled, let's say you're at breakfast with the old man, you know, you're chattering away, and he's taking a little spoon, he knocks it over the thing, and, you know, takes a bite, and then he sees the goo.
Yeah.
He'd keep talking to you, and he would make no comment about it, just pick it up and he'd throw it at the wall, and keep talking.
Okay.
And then, you know, maid would come and clean it up, and they'd bring him another egg, this time hard-boiled. And again, he'd make no reference to it, wouldn't say anything.
This is in a restaurant?
No, he would do it at home.
Why would he need to throw the egg at the wall?
Well, because it was soft-boiled. He said he wanted them hard-boiled. They knew he wanted them hard-boiled.
He could not even throw them in the trash in his own home.
No, he threw it at the wall. It was a statement.
Yeah, a statement, clearly. Wow.
It didn't happen very often.
Well, in any case...
You know how some people were tyrannized over by their domestics? Grandpa wasn't. He didn't have that problem. But anyway, so it's coming. And then, of course, as we know... Oh, and let's not forget, because this will probably have happened by the time we reconvene in 2 weeks or a month or whatever we do this again. But don't forget, we have two important holidays coming up as well.
President's Day? Wait.
Well, yes, but we have Lincoln's birthday and Washington's birthday.
Yeah. You like that?
Well,
the most Catholic president ever in the United States. That's what you said, Washington.
Yeah, I know. And Lincoln, I always say about Lincoln that the worst thing that happened to the South was being defeated. The second worst thing was Lincoln's assassination.
Right. Well,
he suspended habeas corpus. He trampled all over the Constitution. He brought in the income tax. All that's true. But I do not believe that he would have allowed Reconstruction. And that would have meant no Jim Crow. And that would have been a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But if wishes were horses, beggars would ride.
Definitely.
All right. Well, let me see. I don't know. When are we convening again? 2 weeks? A month? Something?
Yeah. Probably in March. Right around the start of Lent. I'm excited for Lent. I'm excited for those reparations and penance.
Well, good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm excited for Mardi Gras.
How's Fat Tuesday in Europe? Do they do anything over there?
Oh, heavens, do they ever. Carnival. Dun, 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 dun,
I thought that was a Brazilian thing.
It is, but it's also throughout Catholic Europe, including the Rhineland in southern Germany and Austria.
Oh, wow.
Fasching.
Okay, very good.
There'll be parties, there'll be parades, there'll be dances, there'll be costumes.
Excellent. Fantastic.
Looking forward to it. But then it all comes to a crushing halt at midnight of, midnight between Mardi Gras and Ash Wednesday.
Yeah. Yes. Well.
Then it'll be time.
Then it'll be time.
All right.
All right, everyone. It's been fun. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for stopping by.
God bless. Be good. And remember, pomposity in defense of ostentation is no virtue.
Something like that. We'll see you next time.
Something like that. Bye-bye all.